And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with yet another episode of UFO News Network Sunday. A lot of news going on in the world of UFOs. Very interesting stuff as we get closer to the release of the UFO report through the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines. And we're going to get to all that. But first, let me bring in my co-host, Chant Hanna. Chant, you've had a busy weekend, I know, covering the SCU conference and now this. So how are you doing? How are you holding up?
I'm doing really well. The SCU conference, I plan on covering in more detail in the show, but they have fantastic guests. And I also wanted to mention that we have a really fantastic show today. Maybe you want to cover that a little bit.
Yeah, we've got there's something we actually agree on, Chant. We've got a fabulous guest today.
Yeah.
So why don't you introduce him?
I would love to introduce him. He's the head of Project 1947, Jan Aldrich. He has been studying the UAP topic since the mid-1960s, is my understanding. And also wanted to mention that Jan is an icon in the UFO community. He's a very well-known individual who has exhaustively studied the UAP topic. And folks, if you do not know him, if you're a novice regarding the UAP topic, his last name is spelled Aldrich. Jan is his first name. And look up project1947.com and go to his site. But Jan, I wanted to start this off right away regarding a really fascinating topic, and that is the Senate Intelligence Committee, the folks that are delegated to the task of the UAP report. They're assigned that task. You sent them 27 folders on the UAP topic and other topics related possibly to Chinese drones or other things, and then the notes on 53 topics and background files on these topics. A lot of these are previous investigations. Now that might sound a little ambiguous to some, but Jan is here to clear up what I just said. So can you please share with us a little bit about that topic?
Okay, on previous investigations, of course, we all know Blue Book, and it started out with Project Sign, but there were other investigations. The Navy was involved in 52 to 54. They won't admit it, but Alfred Loading, oh, excuse me, I'm saying Loading, Art Lindell, who was the head of the Navy photographic analysis division, which was later transferred to the CIA. He went to the out briefing for the Navy project. Of course, he wouldn't talk about what was said there, but that's always something I've had on my mind. And of course, there's other projects hidden away after Blue Book went away. Hynek continued working for the Air Force until 1973. I guess he let loose one time saying that he was still studying UFOs. Other than that, almost nobody knows about that. I asked all his colleagues and everything, and everybody says, "Oh no, I can't say anything about that." So, the Navy was asked by Robert Todd, "Why are you guys?" This is after Blue Book closed. Why are you guys still investigating UFOs? Your fingerprints are all over these case files I'm getting. The ONI, the Office of Naval Intelligence FOIA contact, told him, the Navy doesn't care about UFOs. We don't think they're of any intelligence significance. We only investigate because the Air Force is interested in them. So this is 1975. Finally, 1977, Thomas Ross, Assistant Secretary of Defense for public affairs. Now, he would be of an equal rank to what Mellon was when he was there, but he's not intelligence, he's public affairs. Bob Pratt asked him, "What are you guys still investigating UFOs?" And he said, "Well, not really." He said, "We record them and then they are stored away." And he said they are in the National Military Command Center is where they are stored. Now that's 1977. Well, after that, we don't have much of anything except we have Alonzo saying that 1980s, the Navy was in charge. And he also says that our government asked Uruguay to send the U.S. government reports from the Uruguayan Air Force. We don't know what branch of our government was getting them because Alonzo wasn't forthcoming on that. But so those are just a few samples, and I let the intelligence committee know about those and others. There's electronic army laboratory that was studying UFOs in the 60s. And there other individual what you would say laboratories or activities would sometimes study UFOs for a time and then leave them be. So all that I could find, I let the Senate Intelligence Subcommittee know in my letter about them. We also sent a copy of UFOs in Government.
So basically, just sort of a deep background briefing for these guys to save maybe their staffers a lot of trouble. You've got this stuff already together, and just give them a little background on the long and sort of tumultuous history of UFOs, what the government's doing, and what guys like yourself, Robert Powell, Michael Swartz, in putting together this book here, UFOs in Government, just doing a lot of the legwork for them.
Yeah, I hope so. I also sent them what I call significant events. Say like the Minot case in October 1968. Pretty thoroughly investigated, and then Tom Tulane came on the scene and talked to everybody, all the living crew members of the B-52, which the case took place in. There are radar photographs and a transcript of the conversation with the tower. And this the Air Force came up with a rather silly answer as to what this was, and if it was a plasma ball running around in the lower atmosphere chasing aircraft at over 1,000 miles an hour, that's a major scientific discovery. And why didn't the Air Force inform the Condon Committee, which was in session at the time, or why didn't they inform aviation safety? They did neither, but that's their answer in there. That's one of their answers. Everybody says there's 701 unknowns. I invite everybody to go on to Google and Google Brad Sparks' preliminary listing of Blue Book unknowns, and I contributed to this. Brad did most of the work, We looked at a lot of supposed knowns, and we're not saying that they're unknowns, but we're saying that these things need to be looked at.
Yeah, I've looked at some of those Blue Book cases myself. The Kelly Johnson
Okay.
case,
Yeah.
lenticular cloud, the
I have
Deke
a
Slayton
question.
case, balloon. Yeah, just wanted to talk about. If you look
Jan,
closely at some of those cases, I'm not sure that those explanations are necessarily solved. You're right about that, Jan.
okay. The question I have for Jan is twofold. I wanted to know, and I'm sorry if I missed this part, when did you send in that report? And also, that report, including the breadth of the 27 folders and the notes on 53 different topics and the UFOs and government book. When did you send that in? And also, if you send in more information later, I want to know the time stamps on both of those dates. And then I also want to know, did they request that information?
No, they did not request it. I'm just volunteering it to them. It went in yesterday at 11 o'clock. So it was a lot more difficult to compile than I thought it was going to be. And I'm not finished. I'm not finished. And there's other people that are not finished either. Um, so as you know, it's no secret that Kufo's files are now in New Mexico. Um, and if you look at Dave Mahler's website, you can see his filing cabinets are down one side of the building, and the Kufo's filing cabinets are down the other side of the building. And one of the reasons Dave's files are so big is because he has Antonio Huenis's files that are he went ahead and put them together, so they're there, plus a number of other people. And I will be sending my files down there approximately in September.
And just for the folks who don't know, make sure I'm right about this. KUFOS is the Center for UFO Studies that Hynek put together after he stopped working for the Air Force. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
okay, yeah. Just for folks who aren't aware of that, all these acronyms, all this going on, and go ahead.
Sorry, I should have said that. Let me say what's in these files. It's probably the biggest collection of Project Blue Book cases outside the government. Now, here's why that's important. Because Hynek was the Air Force consultant for almost 20 years. And some of these cases he reinvestigated or investigated for the Air Force, and they are annotated with his what he found. So some cases he solved, and other cases he found. And later on in his career, he started getting much more independent and investigating things on his own without the Air Force asking. And also, he was much more aggressive in looking at Air Force cases and investigating not just one or two items that they wanted him to investigate or comment on. He would go through the whole thing again. Besides that, there are what's called the NICAP files, National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena. It was a UFO organization run by Major Keogh. Major military and scientific people were in part of the organization, and those files are consolidated with the KUFOS files, and that makes a huge amount of files. Like I say, if you go on Dave's site, you can see, I think he has a picture, and you could see the size of the files there. It's just huge, and I have almost the same amount as Dave does. So when that gets down there, we don't know what we're going to do.
He'll have to build an addition onto his house.
In his backyard and throw them in there. I don't know.
Okay, I did want to bring up something to you, Jan. So I wanted to read you a quote from Alejandro Rojas, and whom you've known for many years, and it's regarding the UAP report topic. I'm sorry to our listeners, my throat is a little froggy. I apologize for that. But if you could just suffer through it. Here is a quote from him that he just approved right before the show. He said, "I think it is completely fair to say they have found no evidence that UFOs have anything to do with aliens, and when the UFO community gets upset with that, they need to look at themselves because they're the ones making these claims. And in addition to that, I would also argue that we as civilian researchers have also found no evidence. The end result is the media gets it. At the beginning of when the New York Times story broke, there was a lot of, it's not aliens. So is it Russia or China? But it quickly evolved to, how can it be Russia or China? 122 incursions over the past couple of decades, and we've got them on satellite and radar. Well, it's obviously not Russia or China, so then what is it? And I think that there is an overall very big silver lining because it reinforces and buttresses the credibility of the UFO phenomenon. And in that respect, I think it's a huge, great thing. But a lot of the main reason we got here was due to the efforts of TTSA and in particular Mellon and Elizondo. I think they are disappointed the military isn't sharing more info publicly, but I can understand why the Defense Department would have a problem with that, because they deal with sensitive information and they feel this is sensitive info, and no one has made enough argument that it is not. The next step is figuring out how we look into that and having a mechanism where the Defense Department can get scrubbed data to a serious research organization. It looks like NASA may be getting involved in that, but organizations like the SCU can play a part in that. Do you have a reaction to any of that, Jan?
Well, what I told the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence was, I told them we wrote this book, UFOs in Government, with the philosophy that we don't know what UFOs are, or even if they exist. But the people that in the government that interacted with the problem, they are historical people. Keo was a historical person. Hynek was a historical person. You can read their papers and you can study the history. So that's what we're doing. We're not defending a position on what UFOs are. We are only trying to tell what we know about history and the government's reaction to the phenomena. Who knows? One or the other. Maybe it's more than one thing going on. But the history is what we were writing about. I don't speculate. Myself and Barry Greenwood, we don't. We are just interested in completing the record. That is our mission. We've decided that is our mission. Our mission is not to go to conferences and tell people what we think the UFOnauts will do the day after disclosure. That is not.
Okay, but Jan, with regards to what Alejandro said when he said 122 incursions over the past couple of decades, and we've got them on satellite and radar. Well, it's obviously not Russia or China, so then what is it? So do you have any response to that? Do you feel like
My
it could be another country with, better technology than ours? I know that you are not here to categorize what the topic could be or, speculate, into like get involved in speculative physics or anything like that. But what do you think it could be if it's 122 incursions by satellite and radar?
well, I think the government 122 is not, that's that I don't believe that for a minute. I believe that it's much bigger. I believe the government has more and better information than we do. Lots more, lots better. Like Ratcliffe said, the former director of national intelligence, who's a very smart man, and the woman that's in charge of it today, her resume blows my mind.
Avril Haines.
She's got more degrees than most women have charms on their bracelet. I've only worked. I've worked for a woman like that. She had multiple degrees. I was at MIT working at the Laboratory for Nuclear Science, and this woman had degrees in everything: music, philosophy, psychology, mathematics, physics. She was just such a great, so well read and so educated. And besides that, she was a fantastic woman that could be a model. And I said, I go to work every day here, and I hear her complaining to the other women that she can't find any men. Well, there was no man that was equal to her.
Now, I did want to ask you something that's a little different, and that is, um, do you believe that the U.S. government will or has, in the past, for example, or in the future, will use some kind of circular or catch-22 related statements or strategies or arguments regarding the UAP issue? I want to read a quote to you from Shane Hurd, who is an assistant director for Phoenix MUFON, regarding what he said about this possibility. He said, I think it is possible the U.S. government will use some circular or catch-22 related arguments regarding the UAP issue. However, because they are a public entity, still subject to the people, the pressure brought upon them by the public through the individual efforts of people such as Chris Mellon, Lou Elizondo, and others now will help alleviate that possibility, meaning they are officially now on the record for taking the subject seriously, to report on incidents, to investigate those incidents, and then ultimately provide an accounting for that, for those investigations, and then in turn reporting to Congress, which will be done in an unclassified way, at least in part. Okay, so Jan, do you think that the U.S. government has in the past, will currently, and also in the future use a circular or catch-22 illogic with regards to the UAP topic?
I agree with Barry Greenwood. You can't trust anything the government says on UFOs. How's that? Is that good enough?
Yeah.
Now, let me say something that NICAP's almost full existence, not into the 80s, but from 57 to 1970, was trying to get information from the government and exposing incorrect misinformation, disinformation from the various departments within the government. Now, sometimes they got cooperation. The public relations officer, when Keogh was there, Al Chop, and then Captain Bob White, they would slip him stuff. There was a captain working in Air Force intelligence, and he would give Keogh stuff that was unclassified. Keel would not take anything that was classified. He didn't want to hear anything that was classified. He said he would put his hands over his ears. And a engineer working for Republic Aircraft who had clearances and he was at a lot of the UFO meetings, and he actually went to the CIA and tried to get them interested in UFOs in the early 50s. He also passed things on to Keo, and we have the evidence that happened. Also, the government tried to block hearings in the night about 1960-61, when many congressmen were interested in having hearings on UFOs. The Air Force went out of its way to try to block the hearings. So, and that's not. Oh, that's a good story. Oh, where'd you get that? That's in Project Blue Book. You can read Hynek and Colonel Friend trying to do everything they can at the behest of the Air Force generals and everything to keep this out of Congress. So you can read it in there. And some of the things they did, they asked Hillenkotter, the guy, the man that was in charge of the CIA, a former CIA director. They asked him to resign from NICAP because he being on the board of NICAP, that was an embarrassment to the Air Force, because he was saying the exact opposite of what the Air Force was putting out.
Okay. I wanted to, when you're done, I had a question for you. Go ahead.
No, I'm finished.
Okay, so Dr. Irena Scott, who is a scientist and also an author of many UAP-related books, regarding the UAP report, she had a statement to make, and I wanted to get your reaction to it. She said, having worked at Battelle Memorial in state and with investigators, I know that the 1953 Pentagon Memorandum is a valid document showing that the government was lying to the public about the UFO phenomena. Its importance is that it uncovered the secret study, Project Blue Book Special Report number 14, and then she put in parentheses SR-14, which was done while the Robertson panel was refuting UFO evidence. If the government goes back on this, many will realize how untruthful the government really is on something of high importance. It was discussed in detail in my book, Sacred Corridors, Secrets Behind the Real Project Blue Book, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Roswell Battelle Memorial Medal, Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and UFO cover-ups. What is your reaction to the aspect of her quote where she's talking about how in 1953 the Pentagon Memorandum is a valid document, and then she goes on to state that she feels that the U.S. government was lying?
I totally agree that the Pentagon Memorandum is a valid document. I do not agree that with some of the people that read things into it. Now, in 1951, the Air Force reprogrammed $100,000 to give to Battelle Memorial so they could do the first computer study of UFOs. That was done by General Garland, who was an advocate for UFOs, and probably the reason that Edward Ruppelt became Project Blue Book head. Now, General Garland wanted UFOs closely studied, not just writing down witness statements after somebody saw a UFO. He wasn't the only one. There were people that preceded him, and after he was gone, there's people that succeeded him that also advocated for radar photographs, sensor data, um, deploying cameras all over the place. And in some cases, these guys were the people that were advocating good UFO studies were there's a fight going on inside the Air Force. So these people, a lot of times, there was starts and stops. People would try to get the Air Force to be more um, objective on UFOs, and a program would get going, and then it would get canceled. So that's that. Now on uh, special report, uh, Project Blue Book Special Report number 14. If you go to my website, and it's on the SHG part of my website, there's something about Robert S. Allen. He is a columnist. He wrote about the secret report in 1952, which is the Project Blue Book 14, or we think it is. We're pretty sure that it is. He said it was more extensive than what was finally released by the Air Force. Um, the Air Force, the Battelle project was called Project Stork, and then it went to Project White Stork. And this is the overall project, and UFOs were fit in there. White Stork was about what are the weapons that the Soviet Union has, and how can we counter them. So I guess UFOs were thought to maybe be possibly Soviet. Now, when the study was done, they found things like there's a difference between the unknowns and the knowns. There's a definite difference between them. They don't have things that are the same all over the place. So it's knowns and unknowns are different. They also noticed that around sensitive installations, there seemed to be more cases. And they went ahead and kind of tried to take these conclusions that they made and try to blur them. And they did not release the report to the public until Congressman Moss of the Information Committee said they must release it. And that was before there was freedom of information or anything. They just put out a press release and said, this is what this report says. When the report was released, it was something else than what they said. And Chairman Moss of the Information Subcommittee said, this is for the public. You have to release this. So.
Well, let's get to the news now, because big things are happening now, and I know you have some opinions on that, Jan. We did see an article in the New York Times. Apparently, some intel folks have seen at least a rough draft of this report that's going to be coming out, and they've got a few things. We've got some idea of what's going to happen. You had mentioned or Alejandro did, the 120 incidents over 2 decades. The report determines that a vast majority of more than 120 incidents over the past 2 decades did not originate from any American military or other advanced U.S. government technology. Senior officials briefed on the intelligence conceded that the very ambiguity of the findings meant the government could not definitely rule out theories that the phenomenon observed by military pilots might be alien spacecraft. Many of the more than 120 incidents examined in the report are from Navy personnel, officials said. The report also examined incidents involving foreign militaries over the last 2 decades. Intelligence officials believe at least some of the aerial phenomena could have been experimental technology from a rival power, most likely Russia or China. Seems like there's a little bit of a discrepancy there. I'm sure the final report will clear that up. Some difference of opinion along the way. One senior official briefed on the intelligence said without hesitation that U.S. officials knew it was not American technology. He said there was worry among intelligence and military officials that China or Russia could be experimenting with hypersonic technology. Now, a couple things, because you know so much about history, Jan. All right, okay, today, maybe even up into the last 20 years, we've got those kind of issues, but we've got a pretty good idea what everybody had back in the 40s, back in the 50s, back in the 60s, and they were still reporting these hypersonic UFOs making right-angle turns, hovering, and then instant acceleration, that kind of thing. Nobody had that kind of gear back then, yet we're still getting those kind of reports. That's where some of the real value of the kind of historical research that you do comes in.
Yeah, I would say so. Let me just say this about the New York Times article. Everybody's saying, well, that's, they got a scoop. Yeah, well, if you go walk your dog too, you have a scoop too. And what do you get? Okay, so let me tell you, Ms. Avril Haines there, she briefs the president every day, or one of her deputies briefs the president every day. She's like the number 2 person there, or maybe she's number 5, depending on how they run up this thing in the military. But she's the one that sees him all the time. And if you, I know you sent me a thing saying that Secretary of Defense Austin was briefed on the contents of the report. And I think I wrote back to you, yeah, he wants to know what his chowderheads are telling the DNI.
That's right. That's right.
If she doesn't get good information, she can rip off his face and he won't know it for 2 weeks.
Exactly.
She has the ear of the president, but she is also in a position to have some of the best people in the world. Now, the CIA has not always been in that position. In 1952, the head of the scientific intelligence within the CIA said, what do I have? I have a bunch of square pegs in round holes. They're people that the services don't want because they can't do the work that the services want them to do, so they send them over here to to scientific intelligence. So, but they don't have that today. She has some of the best people going, and they're going to see through some of this stuff that is going on. Now, how much they let the public know, but I'm sure that's why Austin got a briefing. He wanted to know what they're telling her, because they better tell her the truth, because I think she's had enough experience. The number 2 person at the CIA, she has enough experience to know when she's being hornswoggled. So,
well, I think it's important to let the folks know that the Director of National Intelligence is a relatively recent office. It didn't exist before September 11th. It was because of that catastrophe from an intel standpoint that they wanted somebody over the CIA, over the Defense Intelligence Agency, over these the FBI as well, over these different agencies to sort of get everything coordinated and just keep people from sort of sequestering their information and sharing information better. That's kind of the purpose of the entire office.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying. The other thing is, I can prove, like the CIA and the NSA, after they were formed, the CIA got 5 copies of every intelligence report that went through the Pentagon. They got 5 copies of every UFO intelligence report that went through the Pentagon. They got the NSA got 3 copies. And then you see what the FOIA thing is. They put out 900 pages. Are you kidding me? Do you think I'm stupid? I can read this. It says you guys get 5 copies, and you can't find them. It's the Central Intelligence Agency. It's supposed to be able to retrieve information centrally, and they can't.
Well, they do have some. I do know they have some legal restrictions as far as what they gather within the state. So they do have that. So that's, I guess, the FBI's job.
They got everything that Project Blue Book got in 5 copies, plus other stuff. Plus, they got the Navy. The Navy sent them 3 copies of every UFO that I can look at. The Air Force, I've got a lot more information on the Air Force, because every intelligence report that goes through Air Force headquarters is cataloged and is signed a special number. And on the index cards that they used to be cataloged on, now they do it with computers, it indicates 5 copies for the CIA, 3 copies for the NSA, 1 copy for the Navy, 1 copy for the Army, maybe 1 copy for Australia, 1 copy for New Zealand, 1 copy for Canada, 1 copy for Great Britain. Depending on what the information that they want to let the foreigners have. So they're saying that they have only 900 pages. Bafflegaff.
They got a lot more than that, is what you're saying.
Right.
Okay. Jan, I wanted to interject and ask you about a quote I got from a chief investigator who's also an assistant director regarding Los Angeles MUFON. And he said, those who are waiting for official disclosure on the UFO phenomenon are going to be in for a disappointment. As ever, our officials have every reason to continue their long history of obfuscation on the subject. Everything I've heard so far has been more of the same. They speak of these objects breaking Newton's laws over military installations and ships as though this were a new thing. We know that the Pentagon has seen the phenomenon as a national security risk since at least the 1940s. Yet they're playing stupid, acting like anomalous objects playing cat and mouse with our Top Gun fighter jets is something new, that the Pentagon suddenly has an interest. I expect zero transparency here. They will claim to have no idea as to who are flying these objects. They'll say that the phenomenon they are seeing has nothing to do with UFOs reported historically, that there's somehow a difference between the Tic Tac and when the military sent jets up to intercept the Lubbock Lights back in 1951. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I would say right here, okay, Ratcliffe was the former DNI. Now, if you can listen to him and Trey Gowdy talking about their time in the Congress, and Gowdy wanted to be on the Intelligence Committee, and Radcliffe wanted to be on there, and this is kind of a funny story. Radcliffe went to the Speaker of the House and said, "I want to be on the Intelligence Committee, and here's my resume. But if you decide on Gowdy, he knows things that I don't know, and I know things he don't know." And he didn't. Radcliffe did not know that Gowdy did the same thing about a week before. He said, "I want to be on the Intelligence Committee. That's one of my goals. But if you think that Radcliffe is better, I defer to him." So, but Radcliffe has gone ahead and pulled the rug out from DOD. He told the press, "Oh yeah, we've been picking these up with satellites." Now they wouldn't admit that. I have a thing from the Navy that Greenwood got in a FOIA. They're saying they picked up stuff with satellites. And anybody that can get a hold of Jerry Clark's third edition of his UFO encyclopedia, get your library to buy it if you can't afford it, because it's rather expensive. But get your library and read Brad Sparks's essay on NORAD. It is fascinating. And they have UFOs there. And it's he went through the process where how they decide things are UFOs with the NORAD there. So the main thing is that Radcliffe has pulled the rug out from DOD. All that stuff is, he says, we got more cases than you know, and we've got satellite detection.
Okay, I just have to correct myself. Thank you for that, Jim. That was wonderful. Regarding the position and title that Earl Grey holds for MUFON, he is Assistant State Director of Southern California. He's also Chief Field Investigator for many years for MUFON, and he's also a member of the STAR team. Jan, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the topic of classification or classifying things regarding data. Raw data that the U.S. government specialists have when it goes across their desks. Let's just say you're an officer for the U.S. government, whatever your title is, and you are responsible for deciding how to classify a topic that's on your desk. Is it true or not true from your perspective that it is possible that there is an abuse of overclassification of topics in a certain manner? I'll give you an example. I am always in the CIA archives studying whatever I can regarding the UAP topic. And I came across multiple documents indicating that the U.S. government believes that there is a rampant misuse of the top secret classification regarding their files, that it's being overused. Do you believe that's true? And how hard is it to decide how to classify something when it's on a U.S. government agent's desk?
That goes all the way back to Truman. And Eisenhower eliminated one whole category of classification because he thought it was overclassified. There's no more restricted data. That restricted data is nuclear. But the classification restricted, Eisenhower eliminated that because he thought everything was overclassified. So it's a problem that constantly plagues the government. And the president's the one that decides how things work, and it's hard for him to keep control of this. So, so everybody is constantly overclassifying things.
That also brings up another topic. I apologize for asking you this now, but I do want to know your reaction to this, and that is, let's just pretend you are responsible for bringing topics to the President of the United States. And my question to you is, as an individual who in a fictional situation were to bring topics to the President of the United States, would you be bringing him UAP related topics, or do the alphabet agencies want deniability on the president's part so he or she doesn't have to admit they know anything about the topic at all?
Well, obviously Obama knows something about it since he's been talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about a historical thing. Everybody that saw the movie Patton knows that Patton was outspoken. His Air Force general was named Weiland. And Patton said, "This is the best damn general in the Air Force." So when the Korean War was on, they had UFOs that were seen in January, and somebody leaked it to the press in February. And the Pentagon went completely gazumba on it. And this is an error in our book, as a matter of fact. And so they did come up with an explanation, which they sent to Congress because the Armed Services Subcommittee or the committee chair, Richard Russell, demanded to know what was going on in Korea, and they gave him a half-assed answer. But General Weiland in Japan, and he's directing the Korean War, the air war, and he said, "I don't believe that answer. I think that's wrong." And he said something else that shouldn't have been said at the time either. He said, "Oh, the Chinese have wonderful fighter pilots. They're shooting down our planes all over the place. They're just wonderful." What he was saying was the Russians have a special squadron that were shooting down our planes. And until we got better planes and more trained pilots, that was a problem. And he definitely was not supposed to say anything like that, but he didn't care because he was just like Patton. So that
Okay, yes.
Yeah, that's things come out because of that kind of thing.
I understand. Now, I wanted to ask you a question that we talked maybe just a little bit about before, not that long ago. And I framed it in this manner. And you can go ahead and answer however you desire. If you want to bring in another topic to it, it's up to you. But what I had asked you was the U.S. government is charged with the safety of its military. Do you believe the U.S. government would prefer to be on the side of saving a buck or protecting the U.S. military regarding the UAP topic? Here's an example. The U.S. military has raw data indicating swarms of UFO activity are occurring in the United States. Would the U.S. government spend money to outfit their own military to protect them better while they investigate these unknown aerial objects, or rely on their own military's training instead and not spend more money on the equipment they have already? Would they be more likely to lean on the training of their military, or would they spend extra money to outfit them with better equipment to try and learn more about the UAP topic? And do you think they're worried about the safety of their personnel also regarding the UAP topic?
I think they are, but the military's a hazardous place. I was in it for 25 years. They told at one time, about 56 or so, they told pilots to ram their planes into UFOs. So I think what the problem with the military is something that goes back to Keogh. Keogh said there's a silence group, and there's people like Dewey Fournay and Al Chop and people like that want the information to come out to the public. And so there's a difference of opinion within the in the military, and the people that have the upper hand are what Keogh would call the silence group. And I do believe that they have every once in a while come up with a thing. There was some kind of directive: if you see a UFO over the Pacific, try to shoot it down. And that got to the press, and immediately the Navy said, "Oh, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that."
Yeah.
And of course, back in 1952, when the Washington thing was going on, that's what they were saying.
Just curious. Go ahead. Please go ahead.
Yeah, we're going to shoot these things down. So I think, of course, there's a difference of opinion, and of course, we can't spend an infinite amount of money. But we've been willing to pay enough money to get the best military in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But what it would fare against somebody that's a couple of centuries ahead of us, it's pretty hopeless, as a matter of fact.
Well, we are seeing this seeming difference between the Navy, which has been pretty open about this, relatively speaking, as compared to the Air Force, which doesn't seem to have contributed, at least based on this leak to the Times. Doesn't seem like the Air Force has contributed all that much, but it's much more about the Navy. The Navy's doing it, so it seems like there's a difference there between the two branches.
Yeah, well, the Navy was feeding Keogh stuff because he knew he had been to the Naval Academy. He knew all these people. So, and they were all admirals at that. He had been out. He retired because he was injured in Guam, but the most of the admirals knew him from the academy days, so he could go into their offices and talk to them. And he got things from the Navy that he probably shouldn't have. It's interesting too. The Navy's a lot quieter, though. I mean, the Navy doesn't talk about things that happen at sea. So if you look at my Navy catalog, there's a lot of places there where the commander of the ship says, "This didn't happen. Don't anybody say anything about this. I want to be an admiral one day."
Okay, Jan, I wanted to add, that's very funny, by the way. I wanted to ask you, is the Pentagon's UAP report just a PR exercise to satiate an unavoidable demand on the UAP topic?
I think, I think if you look at Stanford's press conference, that's what it was there. I think this will be the same thing, except I am looking at the caliber of people that are going to be having input here, and I'm impressed. And like I said, Ratcliffe got out in front of this. Now he's no longer the DNI, but he said things that to me it's amazing. He said, "Yeah, we picked these up with satellites." That's to me amazing.
Now that could mean beyond Air Force. That could mean NSA as well, couldn't it, Jan?
Sure, it could. Yeah. Well, the NSA don't. They're not known for being very talkative to people.
And they're not under the DNI either, but I mean, it's at least possible.
Yeah, I think everybody comes under the DNI one way or another, as far as NSA and a couple of these agencies that they say don't even exist today, like the National
Reconnaissance Office.
Yeah, well, there, but there's one that's the Ocean Reconnaissance Office. And please note that, we've got a radar net around the United States. We've got an anti-submarine net around the United States. And they pick up things.
Well,
And
okay. Anything else, or yeah? Because I'd like to start talking about Bill Nelson, the administrator at NASA. I'd like to start talking about his comments a little bit because I thought they were pretty interesting too.
yeah, that is really interesting. Oh, wow.
Yeah, because Nelson isn't really a typical NASA administrator. A lot of those guys will take over at NASA. They've sort of worked their way up. Some of them are former astronauts that have gotten into administration. One name that if you look at administrators in the past, you might recognize is James Webb, who's had the space telescope named after him. But for the most part, they're not former senators. They're not former congressmen. Nelson's over there now. He was just put in there by Joe Biden since Biden became president. And he had 3 terms in the Senate, and he was a plugged-in guy, to say the least, on issues like intelligence, like the military, like science. In fact, he actually went into space himself. He was a crew member on one of the space shuttle missions while he was in the Senate. So a very plugged-in guy, and he had some very interesting comments about UFOs earlier this week. So let's go to those right now.
Americans have long been fascinated by UFOs, and the public has seen the videos have taken. But do you think that we have been contacted by extraterrestrials?
Well, I have talked to those Navy pilots, and they are sure that they saw something real. And of course, we've seen their video from their jets. What is it? We don't know. So now that I'm here at NASA, I've turned to our scientists and I've said, would you, looking at it from a scientific standpoint, see if you can determine so that we can have a better idea? We don't know if it's extraterrestrial. We don't know if it's an enemy. We don't know if it's an optical phenomenon. We don't think so because of the characteristics that those Navy jet pilots described as they saw it move around.
They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west.
The bottom line is we want to know, and that's what we're trying to do.
What do you think it is? I mean, what's your personal take on it?
I don't have an idea. That's why I turned to our scientists.
And what have they said to you?
Well, they're looking into it. Would you like me to call you when I get an answer?
Please, because I want to know just as much as you want to know, just as much as the public wants to know.
Of course.
And the Pentagon, they will soon release their report on UFOs. But when people think of mysterious things flying in the sky and aliens, they think of NASA. So what have you guys been briefed about in terms of this report? Have you been involved in any way?
I was actually briefed on this a couple of years ago in my capacity on the Senate Armed Services Committee. NASA appropriately is going to look at it.
Yeah, I'm still playing the video, Jan. Sorry about that.
And that's what we're doing.
But do you think the agency should be more involved at this point?
Well, we are, and I've started it. I've been here a month, and I've started it.
And are you guys working with the Pentagon then on that report?
We are not directly working with them, but I can guarantee you if we find something, the Pentagon will want to know.
And so there are Nelson's comments, and again, they are very interesting indeed. Jan, I'm looking at this thing and thinking to myself, is it possible that Nelson is offering the Pentagon sort of an outlet pass, a way of getting this hot potato off their plate?
I hadn't thought of that, but that's a possibility. I think what we can say about this is what we wanted all along. Somebody outside the military investigating UFOs. And I think that's what we wanted. And now that we got it, nobody's excited. I'm excited. I'm
excited too. I think it's pretty interesting. And realistically, The best sensor data gathering instruments are in the hands of the military, but let's assume that some of these UFOs are ET. They're the worst entity to be handling this, really. So we're in this weird spot. They've got the best data, but they're really the worst entity to be dealing with the issue.
We've always wanted a scientific organization to look at this. Well, the Condon Committee was a big disappointment. But I think this is what everybody wants, is somebody independent of the military to look at it. Now, I'm just fascinated by this, and I think we need to tell Nelson that there's a giant reservoir of UFO reports outside of the military. And like I said, the UFO stuff is Dr. Willie Smith and half a dozen other scientists contributed to that massive data. And the NICAP stuff is some of it's fascinating. I remember NICAP saying during that time is, do you think UFOs should be studied? Do you think they're real? Do you think they might be interplanetary? Well, most scientists would put down that belong to NICAP, put down one for sure, and two, not unanimously, but three, very few people put that down. But almost every scientist that was a NICAP member put down one for sure.
Right.
And that's what we were looking for. And it'll be great. And like I say, I've been working with this UFO stuff for a while now, and I'm constantly surprised at and James McDonald said the same thing. He said, this stuff is better than what the Air Force has. What I've been able to see at Blue Book, he said, this is better. So there is a reservoir of good UFO reports that can be looked at. I'm not saying it proves anything, but if you actually look at it, some of this stuff is really good. And like I said, Hynek followed up on cases. McDonald followed up on cases. Other people followed up on cases. Brad Sparks brought up there's a case in '56 from Project Blue Book, and he said, this says Cochise, and then it says New Mexico. He says New Mexico. Cochise isn't in New Mexico. So we found the 4602nd case file on that, and it's Arizona, of course. And besides that, it's an EM case. The UFO was blocking the radio channels, and I'm saying, hey, Brad, this is an unknown. You need to add this to his list. He said, I already have. What do you think I did? So, and there's a number of things like that. We're scanning these things now. This is very simple. This is not sophisticated like NASA could do. We're just doing this very simpleton thing. We start off the title of the file when we scan it as the date. Well, guess what? There's other files that have the same date, or there's files in my collection, or Greenwood's collection, or Mahler's collection that have the same date. So do we say, well, we already scanned that? No, we scan everything.
Yeah. You got to find a way. Give them independent case numbers beyond the date. There are different ways of doing that. But sorry about that.
Yeah. So what you get is 4 things of the same date. Now, there may be one piece of paper in one of those files that's different from the others. And that's, like I said, we found the Cochise thing. We found that the on-the-spot investigators had more information than the Blue Book file. And there's several cases like that. And then, of course, a pop-up UFO. These two pilots are chasing this UFO, and there's an overcast. So the UFO disappears in the overcast. One pilot goes up, one pilot goes down. The UFO comes out of the overcast, and the pilot above the overcast says, "There it is, and I'm going for it." And it pops back on down into the overcast. It comes out the other one. The other pilot says, "I'm going after this." And I call that the pop-up UFO, but there's information in the press about that, and McDonald interviewed the pilots, and at the time we didn't have the Project Blue Book cases with the names, so it was afterwards that we found out the pilot got the date wrong, and then we said, "Wait a minute, this is the pop-up UFO, and here's the guy that went after it," and it's his testimony right here. And it's better than what's in Blue Book.
Right. Yeah, that can happen. Sometimes it takes a while to put these things together. It's like the pieces in a puzzle, and it takes a while. Exactly. Now, Chant, you're back.
Yeah, I did actually have a question that harkens back to an earlier topic, and I'm sorry to... this topic might bore some of our listeners, but it might fascinate others. And the reason why it is relevant is because the UAP report, in part, hinges on the classification system that the U.S. government uses.
Americans have long
regarding
been
topics.
fascinated by
So
UFOs.
I wanted to bring
And
up
the public
something
is
to
inundated.
Jan's attention, and then I also want to get a reaction from him on it. Now, this article isn't that recent. It came out in 2013. It says the title of it is "The Biggest Problem in the U.S. Government Classification System Today," and it's on clearancejobs.com. But it says every year the U.S. government agencies add petabytes of classified information, and a petabyte equals 20 million four-drawer filing cabinets, all of which will be subject to a future declassification review. And if you hold a U.S. government national security clearance, there's a high probability that you'll be touching some of those documents. Now, I wanted to read an interesting thing from this article. It says, interestingly, the classification system we currently use was created in 1953 and has been a topic of much discussion over the years. And this is a quote. It says, and this quote, by the way, it's from Redefining Security, a report to the Secretary of Defense and Director of Central Intelligence on February 28th, 1994 from the Joint Security Commission. And this quote is, "Despite the best of intentions, the classification system, largely unchanged since the Eisenhower administration, has grown out of control. More information is being classified, and for extended periods of time. Security rules proliferate, becoming more complex yet remaining unrelated to the threat. Security costs increase as inconsistent requirements are imposed by different agencies or by different program managers within the same agency. This accretion of security rules and requirements to protect classified information does not make the system work better. Indeed, the classification system is not trusted on the inside any more than it is on the outside. Insiders do not trust it to protect information that needs protection. Outsiders do not trust it to release information that does not need protection. This Cold War classification can be simplified." The question I have for you, Jan, is, will the U.S. government really work on that? And then the other question I have for you is, the UAP report that's pending right now regarding when it comes out, do you think that report could in part be a potential victim of the over or under classification of that antiquated system I just read about?
Well, it's not. The writer of that article is incompetent.
Well, that was a quote. And so that quote was from
Yeah,
Redefining
the guy
Security.
did do his research.
Go ahead.
There's a major overhaul during the Reagan administration because of the Ellsberg New York Times thing.
Okay.
Reagan said, and this is very smart, but it's not for the public. It's smart for the classification system. He said, if something is classified, it's classified forever. If you have a classified document you got from somebody and you don't need it anymore, destroy it. Or go back to the guy that wrote it and ask them what you should do with it. Can you release it to the public? And so that's called OADR. Oh, geez, I can't remember what it means. Is the guy that wrote it decides whether it's to declassify it or not.
You'll probably remember at 3 a.m. But I was going to ask you, what happens if that guy died?
Doesn't matter. There's somebody in his place.
Yeah, that's true.
The way the military is, it's like the sergeant major told me. He says, nobody's indispensable in this organization here. If you screw up, I get somebody to replace you. He may not be as good as you are, but he'll be there. So there's always somebody there.
So we know the U.S. government is concerned to a degree about documents being classified correctly and coherently, and they have a process for it that could be outdated at times or considered outdated maybe to some. But do you think they're really working on that?
I think it's proliferating in this way. The classifications are probably close to what they should be, but we have another system. It's like a chimney system. If you're working on an aircraft, say a brand new aircraft, your contribution may be the avionics or the wing. So you don't need to know about what kind of computer goes inside the aircraft. That's different. You don't need to know that. So what they do is they have what's called sensitive compartmentalized information. They compartmentalize the thing. You're working on the wing, you only need to know what the wing is. You're working on the avionics, you only need to know about that. You're working on the computer, you might need information from other people working on this thing, but it's a way of keeping the information on a close hold. Because what are the Russians doing? They're trying to get everything they can all the time. So nobody knows how many of these compartmentalized things are. So I worked in nuclear, and we had one system of nuclear release. There are other systems. And remember, we don't want the enemy to know what's going on. Let me tell you a brief thing in Germany. This is not really true. It's just a story to illustrate. We had a position that we were supposed to go to if the Russians attacked. And we were supporting the Germans. And we'd go there, and the Germans would come out there. The people we were supporting, they come out with their band and play. The local people. One place we just pulled into this guy's driveway, and that was our position. I mean, he'd already agreed to that and everything. So, and we're having, whenever we go up there, they, like I said, the band be playing. The Germans would bring us sandwiches and stuff, and everybody'd be having a great old time. And that was the biggest lie in the world. That was not our position. And almost nobody in the unit knew that. The commander, the some of the operations officer and the operations sergeant knew that. I didn't know that. I was the intelligence sergeant, and then sometimes I didn't have an intelligence officer. I didn't know that. One day we went to a completely different place, and there were no bands playing, and the German officers that we worked with were deadly serious. And they were not kidding about anything. This was the real thing. And almost nobody knew about it. And one time we went on a terrain walk. So the University of Maryland has study tours. We did a phony study tour. We got some local historian on a German castle around in the area to come up and give us a lecture.
I think that pretty much concludes
And
the
after he
questions.
left, then we'd walk around like we were a bunch of students, and we'd actually leave some papers behind that indicated that we were students. And it was the officers and some of the senior NCOs, and we'd walk around where the terrain where we were going to be, like we were studying this castle or something. So that's not a true incident, but something close to it like that happened. So
I understand.
you have to realize the enemy is looking at you all the time.
I follow. I wanted to bring up a topic. If you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But the idea, just the idea, I'm saying this in the most general way possible. If you want to go ahead and address this topic, it's up to you. But I have a suspicion that it is possible that the U.S. government has contingency plans for just about everything. Do you feel from your perspective that it is possible that the U.S. government has a contingency plan regarding the UAP report or that kind of topic?
I believe that is so, and people that should know have told me that.
I understand.
And I'd just jump in and say Nelson and NASA could be part of that plan.
Yeah, it could be, but the guy I was talking about, and people could figure out who it was probably by the number of people that have died. So Mark Cashman died, and Joel Carpenter died, and several other people died that might be this person, but this guy's still alive, and he is no longer working in ufology. But every once in a while, he tells me a couple of things, and that's what they have, a contingency plan for everything. They knew they have a contingency plan if Congress gets interested in this thing. They have a contingency plan if the media penetrates their security. They have those kind of contingency plans.
Okay.
Yeah, so well, I think that's true.
Well, in before we end this podcast here, I wanted to also mention that there is a real deep concern, and rightfully so, that members of the press could be charged with legally by the U.S. government, but over documents that may have been overclassified when they shouldn't have been made secret or classified at all.
No. Ellsberg. Remember Ellsberg? Now he was
the Pentagon Papers. Yeah.
Pentagon Papers. He was giving out this stuff, and Ellsberg was, and they tried to stop him. Mm-hmm. And the Supreme Court said, it's your responsibility to keep this stuff secret.
Mm-hmm.
The news people get it, it's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, Ellsberg would still be on the hook, but the paper for going with it is free and clear. They're free and clear.
Yeah, the that's why Reagan put in that OADR, because they could not establish
Mhm.
Ellsberg
Anyway, I
if
think
some of
that
the
pretty
stuff
much
that he put out
concludes
was
the
even
questions
still
for this
classified.
I do have one
point.
question. Well, there is an
That-
interesting article on that topic if anybody wants to read about it, because apparently it is of real concern, and it is on rcfp.org, Reporters Committee, and it says overclassification is an even bigger problem in an age of leak hunting. And it just starts out by saying earlier this month, the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press created a visualization of the uptick over the last decade in the news media leak prosecutions, that is, criminal cases against journalistic sources for the unauthorized disclosure of government secrets to the press. The visualization builds on research by the Technology and Press Freedom Project at the Reporters Committee over the last year to catalog all cases involving either formal leak investigations or prosecutions throughout history. And then it just goes on to say, and I'll be very brief, that research paints in stark relief the dangers from overclassification. In particular, dogged news gathering is one of the only ways to hold the military, intelligence agencies, and federal law enforcement accountable, particularly given the expansive authority that they claim in order to keep secrets. Overclassification has been a concern for decades. In 1989, an opinion piece for the Washington Post, the former U.S. Solicitor General who argued the Pentagon Papers case for the government, trying to block publication of certain parts of a classified history of the Vietnam War, switched sides. There you go. It just mentioned what you were talking about, which is actually a really well-known part of history. But anyway, I'm really glad we were able to talk to you at great length about all this.
Just one thing on that. It will be interesting because, of course, this UFO report is going to have a public-facing and a classified section. Would be interesting if some of that classified material did get leaked. So there's that. I just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, Greenwood did a FOIA with the Department of Justice, asking if anybody had ever been charged by releasing UFO information, and they said no.
Nope.
Wow, that's really important that he did that.
Right.
When did he do that? Do you know roughly?
Oh yeah, it was quite a few years ago. But here's the thing, remember the service reports, JANF 146. It says $5,000 or 10 years if you release material that's in these messages. Apparently, that has never been done. And the Canadians release information that are in these reports all the time.
That is fascinating.
It would probably draw more attention and do more harm than good to pursue something like that legally if it did ever happen.
Ruppelt wanted Menzel and several other people charged with espionage. Menzel stole part of the Blue Book papers for a while. He was denied access to them, and he got them in a underhanded way. And Ruppelt wanted to charge him and under the security laws, and Colonel Dunn said, "No, we're not going to do that."
Yeah. I could see why you'd want to back away from that sort of thing.
Well, Jan, we are always so grateful to be able to bring up these fascinating topics with you and listen to you expound upon them. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, Jan, thanks so much. Thanks so much. It was great having you on at this important time. Good news happening, interesting stuff. We're cursed to live in interesting times, and it's good to get your analysis on what's going on today, and of course some historical backdrop as well. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
But Jan, one last question before you hang up. I wanted to know, can we ask you back on the show when the UAP report comes out?
Sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I think regardless, even some of the negative predictions, I think we'll have plenty to talk about when it does come out. No doubt about it, in my mind. Plenty to talk about. Okay, so that's that part of the show. But Chant, you've been busy all weekend attending the online SCU conference, and one of the cases that I've had a particular interest in regarding this UFO stuff and the work of ATIP has been the Stephenville case. It happened while ATIP was operational, and we've gotten some bits and pieces about ATIP's looking into it. And Robert Powell, who was an investigator on the ATIP case, or excuse me, on the Stephenville case, while he was working with MUFON, he did quite a bit of work, FOIA'd out a radar report, and did a lot of research on the case. And when he appeared at the SCU conference over the weekend, you were able to get in a quick question. So let's go to that, and let's play the audio.
Anyway, I think that pretty much concludes the questions.
I do have one question. I don't know if anybody can hear me.
Did I hear some?
Yeah, I do actually. This is Chant Hannah. I did have a question.
All right, well, Chant, you didn't put that in the thing, but you can go ahead.
No, I did. I guess it just didn't show up regarding the browser that I'm using. I apologize. Mr. Powell, the question I have for you is, are you familiar with Christopher Mellon's interview with former astronaut Terry Virts, where he stated during the Stephenville event, 2 U.S. Air Force F-16s chased a UFO over Texas. The Stephenville incident was investigated by ATIP, and that ATIP investigators were stonewalled by the U.S. Air Force pilots who said they signed NDAs. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I'm aware of that, Chant. Actually, I talked to Chris about that after I saw that interview. ATIP apparently used the Stephenville report, right, to find out. Basically, they read the report. They found out about the F-16 pilots, so then they were able to locate the pilots, because in my report, I give the date of when those planes took off. I also had a FOIA copy of the actual flights, and so it gives the flight information. Now, all the pilots' names were redacted in the FOIA reply that I got, but I'm sure that Chris and the ATIP group were probably able to get their names. And so he said they went to those pilots and they said, you know, we've got top secret clearance, we're authorized to get this data, blah, blah, blah. And the pilots told them, well, it doesn't make us any difference. We were told not to talk about this and we're not going to. So they were unsuccessful in getting any information from the F-16 pilots.
Okay, thank you for your time.
So Chant Hannah, the old my browser isn't working properly trick to get on audio and ask the question. That was a nice job, Chant. I could tell Rich was thrilled that you did that in there, but you got that in there. But we did get the better audio with you actually asking the question. That was great stuff. So congratulations to you for that.
Helps to run the Scientific Coalition's UAP event annually, and I believe it's happened for 2 years. And this is the second year. And that quote that that question I was able to present, I'd like to go ahead and give credit to Frank, my co-host, because he thought up that question. And I was able to
I want to know more about Stephenville. I think it'll be really interesting to see whether or not this case is mentioned in the UFO report, because, you know, hey, it's got everything. I had the graphic up there, 1,900 to 2,000 miles an hour speed, at least 500 feet in size, tracked by radar over Texas. And we've got the additional information. There was an F-16 pursuit of this UFO. If this isn't in the report, you know, I got to say, what's going on here?
Yes, and let's talk about what you just said, but just for reference sake, I wanted to go ahead and let folks know exactly what I was involved in here. So I was attending the Scientific Coalition's UAP conference, and this was on, I believe, was this on Saturday, Frank?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
part you
so
got
this,
Saturday, and then there was some stuff today too. I guess you
okay,
did.
yeah. So this was on June 5th. And just so everybody knows the name of that particular talk that Mr. Robert Powell was giving, that was called An Examination of Past Attempts at Statistical Analysis of UFO Reports and a Proposal for an Improved Analysis Technique. Now, it only takes like 30 seconds to read this. I think it's really important for our members, our listeners, to be able to hear what his abstract was based on and then want to talk about Stephenville. So that is a really interesting title regarding what Powell presented. And I'm not going to read the entire abstract. I'm only going to read an excerpt from it. But the first part of the abstract indicates that he will examine the problems with UFO databases. It will identify the percent of UFO reports that are true unknowns in various historical databases such as Blue Book, NICAP, NUFORC, and MUFON. It will identify what can and cannot be analyzed in such a database, and it will discuss the correlation issues involved with attempts to analyze and what can be considered corrupt data sets. The second part of the presentation will examine past attempts to look for correlations such as the Brookings Institute study for the Air Force project's Blue Book and the conclusions that were drawn. Now, the question I have for my co-host is, do you believe that, and I have a few questions, so hear me out. There are
Okay.
multiple questions. The questions I have for you that are kind of many, but I'll try and do as few as possible. Were there a lot of people researching forensically, in a forensic manner, the Stephenville case? Other question I have is, do you think the folks that came forward with their research, their forensic related research and data on the Stephenville case had anything of value to share? And then the other question I have is, what was the significance of the best part of the reports to you?
Well, as far as I know, that's the report that Powell and Glenn Schultz wrote for MUFON was the only real forensic report. They had FOIA data, so they had something to go on. Plus, they also interviewed a lot of the witnesses. People tend to forget now, especially folks who've come into this UFO stuff maybe since 2017 when TTSA kicked off. They tend to maybe not be aware of or tend to forget this was really the last time in the States where an entire community was sort of up in arms over a series of UFO incidents. And it got a lot of attention at the time. This was in 2008. So when I seriously got into this was 2009. It was still getting talked about. It was kind of dying down, but still I was aware of it. It made national news. Larry King went down to Stephenville and did an episode about UFOs down there in Stephenville. And James Fox's movie, not the one that he just released, The Phenomenon, but the previous one, I Know What I Saw, focused a lot on witnesses from the area, but that's what they had. They had the witnesses. Powell had the radar data, but as far as any government involvement in either doing any chasing or any investigating, we didn't really have any real information about it. So what, obviously, you can look at the dates that ATIP was operational, and there it is. The Stephenville case is right there. Did they take a look at it? That's something I've really wanted to know about from day one since that New York Times article came out. It's something I asked George Knapp about, and he said, yeah, he's can say with some confidence that they did look at it. And then unsolicited, Chris Mellon brought it up in that interview with Terry Virts that you mentioned when you asked Powell that question. So the very little that we really have to go on, just that from Mellon, ATIP went down there, their investigators asked the Air Force pilots, they were able to figure out who was involved, and they got stonewalled, basically. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any mention of this particular case in the UFO report that comes out towards the end of the month, hopefully. And if not, it's something that we should still be banging on, because this is an important case that merits an explanation.
Do you think that the Stephenville case is just as important as the Phoenix Lights case?
Oh, more so for sure.
But
More so.
I know you think more so, but exactly why. And by the way, just for our listeners, most people know what the Phoenix Lights was about, but it was a series of widely cited UFOs observed in the skies over the U.S. states of Arizona, Nevada, and the Mexican state of Sonora on March 13th, 1997. And just so everybody knows, I'm reading that from Wikipedia. I cover the Phoenix Lights
Yeah.
all the time, every year. And
Right,
I think, was like a 2 or 3 hour show on it. And I spent 7 hours at Dr. Lynn Katai's event that she had at the Harkins Theater when it was going on. But anyway, yes, so everybody's familiar with that. But you happen to think that the Stephenville incident is far more significant, but why?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you why. Number one, we've got the radar report, okay, from MUFON, Powell and Schultz. Okay, we've got that, and we've got the fact that it happened during the time that ATIP was operational. They looked into it per Christopher Mellon. They got stonewalled. Okay, why did that happen? And also, it falls within. It happened in 2008, so it falls within the last 20 years. This 20-year time frame that apparently this report that's going to be released in June from the DNI covers. So it falls within the time frame. Phoenix Lights goes back to 97, so you're talking about almost a quarter of a century now. Stephenville's almost a decade, but it's still within the time frame, and we've got enough information about it that, we'd like to know more about this. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't know more about Phoenix Lights. I'd like to know more about that one too. But it seems like we at least have a better bead on what this case is about and some key facts regarding this case than we do on the other. So
now, I want to ask you something in a very biased way.
Okay.
Okay, so my biased perception is if somebody views something that could be not of this world in the sky or coming out of the ocean, and it definitely does not appear to be human-made. Then imagine a series of multiple witnesses seeing the same thing. Don't you think, from your perspective, it's a lot easier for witnesses to cope psychologically with what they saw if it was a mass event, as opposed to just one lonely event where one person saw it and nobody else did?
Oh, sure, absolutely. And in this case, we've got the extra added attraction of having the radar report, which is physical evidence. Something was there. Something was flying there.
So this was a massive event.
I do hold witnesses in very high regard, but I think when you've got physical evidence in the form of a radar report, let's say, or a FLIR camera video, things along those lines, that just adds that much more. There's physical evidence there, and that is physical evidence. So
right, and also, just for our listeners' sake, just wanted to say something regarding why I agree with Frank. Mass sightings are a lot easier to deal with when it comes to UFO reports because let's just say this is a total fictional example I'm going to give here, but you have an individual who might have a checkered past, or they might have some kind of disability that where they might hallucinate occasionally, or they have a disorder that warps their perception of reality according to whatever it is they've been diagnosed with. It's really difficult for people who have truly seen something anomalous to be in that kind of position regarding their character and be characterized in a certain manner. And too many times people in that kind of position have been denigrated, derided, and cast aside. And then but when you have a mass sighting, it almost doesn't matter what your background is, as long as multiple people saw the same thing and they're describing it in a similar manner.
Oh, definitely it helps. Sure,
you
absolutely.
See what I'm saying? So
it's the old strength in numbers thing. It absolutely makes a difference.
But also it's kind of sad because in a way, I think that there's been a prejudice and a stereotype laid upon a lot of these folks that who do have mental disabilities and have been cast aside in an unjust manner.
Or even if they don't, even if they're solid citizens, but it's just one person alone seeing something. Well, I've got a lot of confidence in UFO witnesses, but the cases where you've got, let's say, a witness, two different witnesses in different locations, unrelated to each other, seeing the same thing. That helps, that helps. Having the physical evidence to back up what you're seeing, a radar report to go along with your witness account. That absolutely helps. For the folks that are kind of like alone, and they happen to see something unusual, they've always got that experience. But when you look at this stuff objectively, you got to say, hey, the more the better. Yeah, it raises the level of the entire case when you've got, multiple people, radar, physical evidence, that kind of thing, right, to sort of back up the story. I mean, it's just the way it is. But, if you've had that kind of experience and you don't have somebody necessarily to back up your story, you don't have a radar report to go along with it, well, you still got that experience, Nobody can take that away from you.
You're right. Another thing I wanted to bring up, which is interesting, is, Rich Hoffman said this recently, but I actually have been saying this for a long time also. And many people have. It's not just Rich Hoffman or myself. It's been many people in and out of the UFO community who have stated, if there is evidence at the level of radar data, it's really vitally important for us to see the raw data.
Oh, yeah.
Because you and I both know that deep fakes are totally possible. In fact, deep fakes are so good now that the artificial intelligence to detect the deep fakes can't even detect a deep fake anymore. That's really good. And that's scary. So that's why it's vitally important. It's of critical importance that we get that kind of forensic data.
You want the data, you want the chain of custody and all that, and I don't know that that's going to be in the public-facing part of the report. You have to think it's going to absolutely, positively be in the guts, the classified section of the report. You gotta think it's going to be in there because you look at all these people who are coming out. When you've got Nelson just recently, you've got these former director level intelligence officials like Ratcliffe, who Jan was going on quite a bit about, and he's right about that. I agree with all that. And Woolsey, Clapper, Brennan, all those guys talking the way they're talking, it leads me to believe that we're actually inching towards disclosure. That's what I'm thinking based on what I'm hearing. And I think the naysayers, and they're talking about disappointment. Well, maybe those expectations might be a little high on this next step on the journey. But I think
I just think that the government will be kicking and screaming their way behind the scenes to not disclose as much as possible.
Some segments maybe, and some segments not. I mean, the government is a big thing, And some, like Jan was talking about, there were disagreements internally and inter-service rivalries and all that. So we will see what happens. And all I can say is, I guess we're looking at the 25th, the last Friday of the month. That's the drop dead date, and hopefully we'll see it by then. I mean, a reliable source tells me that the report will either be out a little early, on time, or late. So
I just wanted to bring up one last topic.
That was a joke, Champ, by the way.
I just want to tell our listeners, Frank and I talk every day and we joke all the time. We say the crazy stuff to each other. It's hilarious. But anyway, I wanted to bring up Michio Kaku. I can never say his name right.
Michio Kaku.
Yeah, that. Okay. Okay. This scientist, whom we're all familiar with, he said not that long ago, but I do want to say something after I sort of quote him. He said something to the effect of, hey, if you are abducted, be sure to steal something because there's no law out there saying that you can't steal. Okay, haha, very funny. However, what I want to say is this. If you're going through the trauma of getting abducted, it's highly unlikely you have a CSI lab in your back pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to imagine at that second thinking to take something. However, some people have the wherewithal to do that. I'll give you an example. This really happened, and I think I actually had my co-host listen to part of this show where there was like a disaster of a certain airplane where they actually sort of kind of crash landed. But before they were going to make their landing in an uncertain manner, one of the people had the wherewithal to start taking pictures because they truly felt if they were going to die, they wanted someone to have some kind of evidence to look at. Now that is a kind of person that would need to be abducted if there was a need to be abducted.
There you
Okay,
go.
but
Take
they're
that
very
guy.
rare, and it's just, what do you think? Don't you think it'd be difficult if you're going through the trauma of being sucked into some unknown ship with these strange beings around you? Are you really going to remember to? Not only that, but these beings could potentially be hundreds of millions of times smarter than you. Don't you think they would know ahead of time that you might do that?
Maybe,
I mean,
maybe.
seriously, like, if they're that far in their technology, you would think they'd have a contingency plan for that.
Well, I
And
think,
if you did put something in your pocket, pretty sure they have the technology to
yep,
take it back out.
they'd wag the finger at you. They'd
Well,
wag their
that's
little
why I wish I
finger at
could
you.
talk
Don't do
to.
that.
Well, I wish I could talk to Mishu Kaku and let him know, hey, that's a stupid idea. Like these beings are potentially infinitely smarter than we are at our IQ level. You really think they're that dumb to let people steal something? Come on.
Well, what they could do is leave out some things that they picked up off Earth and just kind of leave them out for somebody to take, and somebody will just take a spoon that got stolen from somebody's kitchen, and they'll say, "Hey, I got this from an alien," and it's really just a spoon from some Earthling's kitchen. That could be too.
That could be. But on that note, thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your listening to our podcast tonight. And thank you, Frank. We had a great show. Really
Yep.
enjoyed Jan.
Thanks, Chant, and great job all throughout the weekend. Really, we saw a little bit of it here today, but you'll have some time before we come on again to put together what you picked up at the SCU. So that'll be good stuff, and there will be more news. You literally have to keep your eyes open every day, and as soon as another 2 or 3 or 4 stories come up, we'll be ready for another news analysis show. So thanks again to Jan Harzan, thanks Chant, and thanks for listening, everybody. Or Jan Aldrich. Oh my goodness, sorry about that. Sorry. Sorry, Jan Aldrich. Jan Aldrich. Thanks again, and have a great week, everybody. And take it easy. Bye-bye.